is on this, yeah, this right here on the side.
Put it down, what do you think?
Yeah, you put it down, it doesn't pay. Most common question is, why doesn't my machine pay? Okay, could be a couple things other than that, but that's the first one I tell them to check for, is check for this hook and make sure that hook's not down. You probably can't see it, but make sure that hook is not down, because when the fingers are stuck there in one spot, they ain't gonna go in and pay. So you're not gonna get anything. And a lot of them don't realize it.
Which hook is that now? It's on the side? I didn't see it on the other side.
The hook down inside there is a little hook,
Oh,
okay? And then when this thing, when you go to start, all right, and it should have hooked. It absolutely totally hooked. But see, none of the fingers came in to peg, to hit into the discs. So none of the fingers being there to hit into the disc. In other words, you're not gonna get any money out of it. All right? So, easy way to leave that is, okay, you bring that up, and then while it's in the up position, so you don't have any more problems with it, I always take and I'll put a piece of really fine wire, and I'll fine wire it up, twist it over. That way you never have to worry about it again. It won't fall down, it won't do anything. A lot of people take them off and
What's the purpose of the hook?
anti-cheat,
Oh,
if you try to cheat it. And that way it hooks over and you don't get anything. But that's one of the common things. The other is, you could have a coin flipped in the tube.
Sorry, who's it to prevent from cheating? The owner or the customer at some point trying
It's
to?
the customer. They're always trying to keep the customer from cheating.
Okay, that's what I thought, but
So if they didn't put a nickel in there, that's usually when it does that. The other,
so then the operator has to come and open it?
yeah, well, they have to remedy it. Let me shut this thing off. Got a guy at home that's bugging me about something. The other common thing that happens is sometimes maybe you'll get coins flipped in the tube. I'll probably have coins already, but coins will flip in the tube. They'll get down inside the payout slides, and they won't go anywhere because they'll be on edge or whatever, and it won't slide back forward to pay. Won't do that. Won't pay you anything. So then you have to take the tube off. Which there's two steps of taking the tube off. You take this off of here, cotter pin on this side, take off the washer. I don't know how many nickels Keith has in there, but I'm not gonna take it off. All right, there's a screw right here. You take that screw off, take that screw out, and you pull forward on that, and you just lift the whole tube. Try and get your finger underneath there. Keep all the nickels from going all over God's green earth. And pull that out, and then you undo whatever's down in there, flipped over, upside down, whatever. You undo that down inside there, pull it out, you can dump just once you get it off, you can dump the nickels out, but put them in a pile. You can also feed them back in there by just feed them back in, put them back in there, and then you're all ready to go. That's the second thing that's common that it doesn't pay out. The third thing is down in here, and this is what I'll do usually just to test it out and make sure that that's what it is either first, second, or third. But down in here, you always tell you about the fifth click. All right, which I got so tired of hearing it that I just wanted to go scream. But anyway, there's a little piece down in here. What it does is it comes behind the payout slides, and it holds the payout slides forward. So when you hear that click, it's actually, if one of these hammers goes into the payout zone, when you hear that click, it's releasing that master slide for the payout. So in other words, if you have something that fell in here, that last click is the one that's the most important, because that's the one that releases that master slide to come back. And if there's anything there, it'll unload the nickels that you've won and drop them out. If this piece behind the master slide doesn't come out, it won't move back. Or if it doesn't go in, it won't move back. So that's another important thing, is to make sure that this piece down below in here, and I don't know how I would show you that without having you come walk around. But that piece down below in there has to make sure it's not sticking behind the slide, or it's not stuck to where it doesn't go in behind the slide. So that's an important thing too. So those are the three things to make it where it really won't pay, is those three things. Most of the time, 90% of the time, 99% of the time. But the other thing is I could do that. Let me put this thing back.
Right now you can fix.
Okay.
They quit paying the other day.
Throw this back in real quick.
Yeah, right.
He knows how.
Yeah, but when he says it, that means it usually doesn't work that way.
All right, usually when I go to take a reel bundle out, the first thing you do is you want to take the brakes out, all right? Take all the brake wires out.
They don't have to go in,
No.
back in any order?
No.
Okay.
You
So-
have to readjust them anyway.
Oh,
So you throw those down and get them out of your way. Now, what I usually do, I take it apart different ways, but and usually, and you don't have, well, it does, it's there.
Got a quick stop in it.
Yeah, usually they're gone. This one's disconnected. All right, so now everything's released off of the reel bundle, okay? That's where it's free spinning. Now what I'll do is, all you have to do is on the end, when you go take the bundle out, you loosen up this one.
Charlie, how did you lock it out?
There's right here, there's a,
Yeah, you locked the
it's got a spring, you
You
lock
lock
the
the
fan,
fan, okay.
yeah. So, then you undo the other screw at the other end, another cap screw on this end. I'll get Keith back in pieces, he'll love me. So, and then you pull the rod out. Then you pull it out. All right, now down inside, these are the things that get really greasy and make you want to scream sometimes. So that's why I take everything down, right down to the whole frame. Everything's off. There's nothing. You see none of this down in there. Take it right down to the frame. Ooh, there's a nickel. And then you take it apart and start dismantling it. You know, I'll take the back off. I usually start on the side over here. I usually start on this side after I've taken the reel bundle out. I'll start taking all this off. Most of it's, the tools you need are real simple. Pliers, needle nose. Needle nose is the most I use when I'm disassembling this, is a needle nose. The screwdriver, long one, and then not always do I use a spring hook, but sometimes, like on these, I'll just take my finger and I'll just go, just take them all off with my finger and they snap right off. So I usually go on the side. I'll take the side off first, and then I'll just work my way down on through and work my way into taking this off. I'll go down in there and take all the slides out, take the springs off first, and then take the slides out. And I try and keep them in, if you've not done it before, try and keep them in order, because there's some smaller ones, some bigger ones sometimes. So if you get them out of order, you're not gonna get the right pay if you don't put them back in the right order. Then you'll be screaming trying to figure out what you did. But,
That's happened a lot.
yeah.
That's on the slides.
And then a lot of things that's common, and I've probably clued 3 people up in the last month on it. When they take these out, and a lot of people don't know, when they take these out, this one is actually shorter than this, or longer than this one. This one's actually short. This one's actually No, this one's actually a little shorter, this one's actually a little longer. So sometimes they'll take the middle one and put it on the first one. So it spins a little bit around and then it stops right away. This one here spins a little longer and then it stops right away. And the guy sent me a video and I says, did you just take it apart? And he goes, yeah. So I go, take the first reel stop off, change it with the second reel over where you have the first reel, try it. About 10 minutes later, he sends me a thing, he goes, perfect, it works perfectly now. And that's a lot of common in with a lot of the people when they take it all apart. And just swap those two back if they're, if it's not spinning long enough, just swap it back and it should be fine.
They're not stamped at all? You just,
Nope. What I usually do, I'll take and, just so I don't screw it up, I'll put a black marker on it, and then when I get it into the bead blaster, and I bead blast everything, from stem to stern. And I use really, really, really fine bead blasting. Yeah.
How big is your,
the medium.
how big is your blaster? Is it one of those big
It's
ones?
a big tank.
Yeah.
It's like,
The Home Depot one?
no, this one come
Oh,
from
you
this one come from an industrial.
Industrial?
Yeah. And I'll put it in there. It depends on what you're blasting at the time. A lot of times, like with this, I run about 85 pounds in it, 85 pounds of pressure in there, and a lot of times, I was telling Mark or somebody that sometimes I'll even take it after, and I have these, I'll soak them, and then I'll anything that's greasy, I'll soak and try and get that off of it. I use a wire. I didn't bring that either. I use a little wire brush, a little small thing. You get those at Home Depot. Little small brush, and I'll brush them. And then actually I'll put it back in there and get a little bit of the solvent on there, and I put it right into my cabinet, and I blow that, and I blow the solvent, and it just seems to just roll it right off of there and disappear, and then it just goes into the dryer, and it dries out, and it comes back, and everything's nice and dry, so it's fine. Not much goes through it, but it kind of cleans it and makes it a little, in my mind, it looks like it makes it a hell of a lot shinier than it would have been the other way. But it works real well doing it that way. And like I say, I'll take everything off, I'll soak it, I'll brush it, put it in the blaster, blast it. Then I start building it from the bottom up. And then I'll start with the slides first, after they're all cleaned and bead blasted and clean. And I even leave the springs on them, and I'll take the springs and I'll put them on there, and I'll bead blast the springs. Then when I clean it, and actually I clean it in all the slides and stuff, I'll clean them with water after they're bead blasted, because they're all brass, except for two, and then I dry them, I hand dry them like they're dishes. Then I'll take the springs and I'll run them under the water just to make sure there's no granules in there. And I'll run them under the water, pull them open, washes all that stuff out. I don't have no solvent involved in that area. So it washes all that out, and they're nice and clean and ready to go. I'll put them in there, and then I'll put the top on it next. Slide them back and forth to make sure I didn't get them in there at an angle. And make sure everything's kosher. Then I'll go back through here, I'll take the spring hook that I dropped on the floor. I'll take the spring hook and then I'll respring everything. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I drop down into here and all the timing stuff for the stops, the bottom part, all that, and I'll start building from the bottom up after it's cleaned. I'll start building everything from the bottom up. And then all this will be taken off, and that's all cleaned and bead blasted and washed off. The thing I do, and I like, I keep it that way and all in order, is all the lower payout fingers that go behind the slides. I keep those in order because they have little certain bends of where area they go to. So when you take them out, I usually run them through a screw. And I'll put them on a screw, and then I'll take them off bottom first, and as I do that, I put them on the next screw over and just run them back out. And then there'll be the head of the screw on this side, so when I start at the top coming out, work my way down and got it all back into the same spot, right in the same order. So that works out real well. The upper payout fingers are pretty self-explanatory. You go from small to big, so that's pretty well self-explanatory. You can't mess that up. Let's the other thing that's, oh, and a lot of times you'll run into, like on this, when you go to pull this rod out of here, a lot of times the grease is so hard and stiff, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like trying to pull an elephant. And so what I do is, I'll try and get that's why I brought that piece of steel wool. I'll get my rusty, crusty piece of steel wool and I'll spray it with, and everybody frowns on it.
WD-40?
I spray it with WD-40. That's to get it freed up and loosened up, but you're not using it for a lubricant. You're just using it for a degreaser and get that crap out of there. So I'll spray it with that, I'll wipe it around here with this, and then get it as clean as I can, because you can't get into the back part of this because there's a sleeve over it there. So hopefully it's not too cranky gummy up in there. But once I get that done, I'll still spray as best I can down through here to try and get something to start washing that crap off as you're pulling it through. And I've never had any issues with them, but I had some ones I had to tug my life away on it, but I got it out. But that's one of the harder things to do on it. It's really not complicated. And everybody says, oh, there's so many of this and so many of that. I says, just jump in and do it. If you have another piece that you can look at when you're putting it back together, just look at it and say, oh, that's where that goes, or oh, that's where that goes. I mean, I've helped people along with getting all their stuff back together, and it's been fine. All right, now I'm gonna listen to everybody frown on this one. On your clock motor, I'll soak it in the same thing I use for the solvent. I'll take my hose, my air hose, and I'll air hose it off. I'll put it back in the solvent and shake it around, rinse it out. I put it in the bead blaster. I bead blast it. I knew I'd get a rise out of you. Yep. I put it in the bead blaster.
Now, were those springs coming off of those little gears?
Never heard them. I'll put it in the bead blaster, bead blast the top, bead blast the bottom, check the springs, bead blast all the gears, never take it apart. I'll take it up and I'll wash it in the sink, and I'll wash the living heck out of it, and I'll run it, make sure, and I'm running it as I'm washing it, and make sure nothing, everything's out of it, all the grit's out of it, and then I'll take the 3-in-1 oil. I'll 3-in-1 there's little bushings all over it. I 3-in-1 all the bushings, and then as I'm running it and keep going, then I'll run Vaseline around the gears. And then they have grease on, Vaseline on the grease, or on the gears, and they have 3-in-1 oil on all the bushings. And the 3-in-1 oil is actually coming through the bushings. Yeah. And so I know it's oiled, I know it, and then I'll run it, smooth as the baby's butt.
What about the 3 little ones on top?
Get them all.
Those with the little bitty springs, you never got any grit stuck in there?
Nope. I even run the ratchets. I grab the ratchets with a spring hook. And I'll sit there and go like that with the spring hook on the ratchets. And I'll check every spring before it goes. Never had a problem, never had an issue. And I make sure everything's nice and clean, but I knew I'd get a rise out of it. That's why I had to look over to you when I said that.
I just use carburetor cleaner on it, and then I would use
But
salt.
then you get the white, you get all the white.
I rinse it all off.
Yeah, you get all the white,
Carburetor
but I
cleaner.
found that's the easiest way with me to get everything the heck out of there.
Yeah.
And they look like brand flipping new when I'm done with it, and it's absolutely spectacular. I've never had any issues with it whatsoever. The last one I'm working on now, though, there was 2 springs that were missing, but they were missing before I even started. And I thought that motor was gonna be a piece of crap, but it works perfectly. But what else was I gonna tell you about? Basically, that's the other thing. Every time I take and you'll see a bunch of nubs sticking out where all these parts go. There's a nub here, there's nubs here, nubs here, nubs here, nubs there. And yeah, when you take and you bead blast this whole thing in the rack with everything off, everything's off of it when I do everything. Everything is off of it. So I bead blast the whole thing, and then lastly, I'll take this here, and I'll put a little bit of WD-40 on it, and I'll sit there and each post, I make sure that there's no buildup around it anywhere, and I'll take each post and run this around each post, and I'll take the piece that's going on there, make sure it slides on back and forth real easy, and, what else do I gotta do? Oh, I worked on one of the keys over there, and it was like pulling teeth, trying to get that piece off, man, it was stiff. Okay, a lot of the, I use to lube, I don't know what everybody else uses, but it was recommended from the factory was Vaseline. Anybody ever read the little papers in the back of the doors?
Gasoline.
Vaseline, okay, yep. So I use Vaseline, and I know back in the day, there's people that use that white lithium, and it does nothing but just ruins everything, because it turns nothing but a piece like a cake. It just turns into cake. Even the old grease dries out. Vaseline is non-drying. I've had a can open, and my father-in-law actually had the can open, lubricating the presses with it. And that can has never been closed for at least 25 years. I still use, there was a big jar of it. I still use that jar to this day. I do in there, I still use it. Been open for 25 years at least. And it's just as soft as the day it was opened. Maybe just a little bit, but it's just as soft as the day it was open. But no, it's very good stuff. You know, and I take the caps off. All this, every piece on these mechanisms, I bead blast every piece, and then I make sure that everything is, you know, I'll remark the tops, because obviously that's going to take the bluing off of it. But I'll re-blue the tops and make sure that, you know, everybody knows that that's the way it goes, and put it back together. And usually before I get it all back together, and if it's like this state right here, yep.
What do you mean by re-bluing? There's a little.
On the top of the caps are blue.
Oh.
There's a blue.
You don't wanna get them upside down.
Yeah, you get them upside down, they're gonna jam this whole thing up, because they're made for a specific direction, and you can't mix the caps up anyway, because this cap over on the left side, as you're looking at it, this cap is, doesn't have all the ridges on it that this cap has.
So it's just a color,
It's just a color, but it just tells you that this is top,
okay.
blue, top, blue, top. So that's all that's for. And make sure you have all the, like I say, no grease buildup, which if you've solvent it and cleaned it properly and all the pieces properly, some people wire wheel all the pieces, and I just don't. I'll take like the rods, I'll even run the rods through the blaster, bead blaster, but after I'm done with the rods, I'll take a steel wool and I steel wool the whole thing, back and forth. And I'll use, and make sure it's nice and smooth. But usually it is, because I use really, really, really fine medium for doing that. And then usually on the other, I use a 0-1/0 steel wool and steel wool everything.
You
But-
don't treat the metal when you're done?
Hmm?
Don't treat the metal with anything?
I usually do, and this is, you know, I'll probably see a lot of frowners on this one. The metal, when I'm done, or any of this stuff when I'm done, I'll take it and I'll kerosene it. I'll dip it in kerosene, that puts a film on it, and it's just as good as anything else you wanna put on there. There's no having to take the residue off, there's no nothing. You just put the kerosene, let it, put the film on there, put it together, you're done. I've done that for 30 years. Never had an issue.
Aviation, we use LPS3
Yeah,
and put it on and wiped it off.
Yeah.
Put a wax coating on there,
Yeah.
is what it does.
yeah, that's all I ever do though. I throw it in kerosene, pull it out of the clear kerosene, and then it dries. You got a film on it, you're done.
Okay.
And then just stick it all back together.
And it's
Same
cheaper.
with, huh? Yeah,
It's cheaper,
Yeah.
and it's cheaper.
yeah. But you gotta think 30s. They didn't have none of the modern. They didn't have none of the modern stuff which you
Right.
have convenient to. So you have to think in the 30s. How would they do it?
Yeah.
Well, they also did do nickel, you know, some kind of plating on it. I don't know if it's a nickel or what it was. They do have some kind of plating on it.
You're talking about putting kerosene just on the metal parts as a lubricant or something, John?
It's a
Kerosene.
protector.
It's just kerosene as like a surface,
A surface.
Anti-corrosion.
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 Yeah, without going to, or sometimes I'll even just take a can of this and just play the lemon heck out of it and let
Yeah.
it do its thing. I've done that before too. So that's what I've done for 30 years.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Timing
Mm-hmm.
gets out of time.
It depends, there's a couple of things that, you know, like I say, if it gets out of time and, you know, these are falling too fast, you can switch these around. Down in here, sometimes I have taken, I gotta look at it, up in here, and I just set it off, but up in here, when that comes back to do that, if it's too fast, I've actually taken, there's a little ear that sticks up like that, I've actually taken that little ear and I just moved it back just a snitch. And that gives you a little more time on it to.
The ear that on the first, real one?
Yeah, down in here on the, there's an ear right here that pushes back on this one, you know, and it'll push that one back.
Yep.
There's a little ear, sometimes if I need to take it, put it forward or move it back, it depends on how it's hidden. And that usually solves the problem, for me anyway.
And the Z-shaped lever that's attached to the clock can also get bent. I had one.
Right,
machine
and-
I picked up, it was bent long, you could bend it back.
Right,
Just
and
slide
even on here, right, you're absolutely correct. On this,
Yeah.
I've had that happen more than once.
Yeah.
As if you take this and sometimes they bent it back
Yeah, they bend it.
or they bent it forward, and if you just take that and you put that in the proper position,
It works.
usually it works perfect.
Very
That's a
slight
lot of,
adjustment.
yeah, don't go
Very
crazy
slight.
on it. But, you know, if it's in the 90-degree position from like this, instead of like this, or like this,
Yep.
you want it like that.
Right.
Sometimes it gets out of whack, don't ask me how. I don't know whether it's done purposely or from use, or who knows. But sometimes that does that. But, that's usually the fix for that too, or I do like what I just told you. Bend that back and forward if everything else is going haywire, but just subtly, not crazy, subtly. What else didn't I cover?
The bar going off the back, I mean, the spring off the
This
back
one?
lever.
This
yeah.
one?
Yeah, when, does that speed the reels up and down? The reel
It helps
speeds?
your reel, yeah, it helps them in the spin.
Yeah,
Yeah, it assists in the spin because that pulls that up
right.
and helps in the spin.
So
So
what
this
do you-
is important that you have that on there.
What do you recommend? I mean, how tight do you get it? The
Um,
tighter, the faster the reels spin?
You don't wanna go nuts with it, but you don't want it to, usually, see, even this one here, this one's setting a little, I would have it just a little more. Usually I like to have about 1/8 to 1/4 up out of the ear,
Right.
about 1/8 to 1/4, 3/16 up out of the ear. And then, usually from there, that's right where I've always kept them, and it's been fine. There's been no problem whatsoever. The reels spin the right speed. Everybody knows how to speed up and slow down a clock.
Right.
You bend the fans a little bit if you want a little more speed out of the fan, make a little more faster action on the machine itself, or if you want to slow down the action and you can open them wide up to where they're straight. If you bend them, the fan goes faster, the clock goes faster.
So, sometimes there's a screw on the end of the clock spring that you can bring it forward and back.
On the end of the clock.
Well, when the clock spring meets the frame on the other side, there's sometimes there's an adjustment on them.
Oh, you're talking about down in here mostly on the high tops.
Yeah.
Those are on the high tops, yeah.
Well, how do you know what to do with those?
See where you see where you're on this piece here.
Right.
Okay, because that's where that is. So you want this piece to be in the right position. You don't want it to be too far forward. And you don't want it to be, and it won't go too far back. At least I don't think it would have. But you don't want it to be too far forward because then you're stopping everything. You know, you're releasing everything before
Too
it's
quick,
time.
right.
Before it's time. That's usually, those are on the high top ones. And not on, this is an older model, so they didn't have all the modifications that they did onto the high top, a lot of the high tops. But, I think this, what else? I don't know, any questions so far?
One of the things I've done that helps a lot to get that where the hammers are, that you can't get the pin out,
Mm-hmm.
and get it out about that far. I put my electric drill on it, turn it on, and spin it out.
Oh, it
comes right out.
the set screw?
Comes right out.
Yeah, you're talking about the set screw?
Well, no, I mean the whole rod. You just put it on the end of the rod. Sometimes you can get the rod out about that far,
Yeah,
and then it becomes hell.
yeah,
I just put my drill on it, torque it down, turn it on, and
yeah,
it comes right out.
yeah. I mean, there's, you know, everybody has their own little tricks with a lot of things, but, you know, once I get to that point where I'm taking this off, I've already had these off already.
Yeah.
This is already off, all this stuff on the back is gone, and I'm just looking at, upper payout fingers, and then I start taking that stuff off.
Great.
And then, take that off. Usually I have all that off already, but I just work my way from the top and go right down into the bottom of it.
What lube do you use on the pin that goes through the real bundle?
The one that goes to the real bundle, I use a combination of the 3-in-1 oil, and I'll smear a little bit of Vaseline on it, and I'll take a little bit of the 3-in-1 oil, and I'll just rub through it, and I'll make like a more smoother, slicker Vaseline, and it works perfect. It works fine. It works absolutely perfect. You guys are late.
We got lost.
Oh my goodness. You only had to come from the end of the street.
I wasn't driving, Stacy was.
Oh, man.
Had to finish their ice cream before they left.
Did you finish that ice cream? You guys had an ice cream headache. Ice cream coma.
Rain freeze, good lord.
Those are the biggest sundaes I've ever seen.
Weren't they huge?
Oh my
I had a
God.
banana split.
That was like dinner. That was like dinner. But, any more questions on anything on this? Randy's got one, I know he does.
Do you prefer to work on the mills versus?
I do,
Dale, or-
actually I do. Like I always sit there and tell people, I've done so many of these, I said I can be blindfolded and put them back together. It's like putting your weapon apart and putting it together. You gotta do it blindfolded.
John, those blocks,
Here,
yeah, worn grooves.
you know
fill
what?
them in.
No, you know what you can do? Sometimes they're loose,
Turn 'em.
sometimes you can turn them. You get a turn out of them and you go to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done that, I heard him say it.
Yeah, I've made a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And take them off.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
grind them
'cause a lot of
out.
times though, these are loose and you can take and you can turn them to the
Some
next.
of them are just a bear.
Yeah, some of them you can just turn and just let them go, and there's some that are questionable, but I put it all back together and I'm looking at it and says, man, they run perfect for me.
Maybe it's squirt nut.
No,
But,
it's a block.
Sometimes they have springs on them.
Yeah, there's different types. I see somebody has taken this one here and it must have it's got a little bend in it. A little bend in it for some reason, it must have been rubbing up against maybe the wheel, and I see that wheel there's got a little bend in it too. The one on the real tin. But on the real tins, I take these apart.
That's a bear.
Yeah, you reach down into here and there's two screws there, two kind of bolty screws there, but you got to take the nuts off the back. Oh, these don't have them. They took them off already. Oh, they don't have them. But anyway, you loosen those up and you can take this thing apart. This one will come out as a big long piece, the next one's a little bit shorter, the next one's a little bit, and then eventually you'll end up with this last one right here, you'll end up with just this and a reel.
And one of those,
Yeah.
Yeah, you take it apart and then you'll end up destroying most of the time, and a lot of times if you're careful, and these would be possible here, if you're careful, you can take all these off. You got tools that take those off, you can take them off, pull them off really careful, and set them off to the side somewhere away from everything so they don't get all screwed up. And then once you get all this clean, and there again, I take it out. Ooh, this has got a cheater in it.
That's what I said, it's got a cheater in it.
It's got a cheater in it. But you take those off, set them off to the side, take it all apart, break it down. I'll put it in I'll put it into the bead blaster. I'll clean everything out of it. And then I absolutely steel wool everything on it to smooth everything up, because if you got drag on there, and you'll be unhappy as heck with it, as it'll drag, but I steel wool the heck out of it, make sure it's all nice and slick, and then again, I put a fine coat of Vaseline in it, start putting it back together, and then you have to make sure that you have all these in the proper way to when it's supposed to stop on these. And it really doesn't matter, because once you start putting the strips back on it, as long as you have this aligned where they stop in the proper spot, you can still start and just put your strips on there. What I'll do is I'll mark the jackpot. I'll mark the jackpot across here where it's supposed to be in the window, and I'll mark the jackpot on here where it's supposed to be in the window. And so I'll start with that. That kind of gives me an area to shoot for, and then you gotta fine tune it. And once you get it together and the hammer goes through the jackpot part, then you fine tune the reel strips to that, so it's nice and square across the window into the pointers on the window. And before you put the reel strips on there though, you paint the edges, make them look nice and pretty. And usually on the edges, I use bluing. What do you use? You use bluing?
Actually, I take the new Pintels that come with paint, the actual paint.
Mhm.
I just spin it with it, holding it, spin it. You can get them in different colors.
That's actually what they have on here is machine bluing.
Yeah.
It's real similar to machine bluing. And I just take there and I put it in there and just go, just like you see there.
You buy it from a gun.
Same thing over here.
From a gunsmith or something.
Yeah, just bluing.
Yeah.
And then I just do that to both of them. I'll spin it and do it, go to the next one, you know, spin it and do it, spin it and do it. Blue them all up.
Really?
You don't use that?
I just use blue paint.
Do you? I mean, I've done blue paint too, but I mean, you know, I did do the bluing for a long time, but some of them, if there's a little, if they're little, sometimes you'll get tins that's got a little pitty on them, then I'll use the thicker stuff.
Yeah, that bluing comes off pretty easy though, doesn't it? Scratch.
Well, you
Just use it
know,
for laying.
no,
Layout. You're talking about layout dye.
layout dye, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, layout dye. And so that's what I use for that. Or I've used both. I use both actually, but depends on what's closest to me to what I use. Oh, there's a layout dye, I'll use that. Oh, there's the blue paint, I'm painting this one blue. So I'll use the blue paint. I go either way.
Were they always blue?
No, there's red.
Okay. That's why I asked, 'cause I
Yeah.
had some that were, I have some that are red.
No, there's some that are red. Any other questions?
If it pays out your coins, 2, 3, 5, 15, but it doesn't pay out the jackpot, what would you look for first?
If it doesn't pay out the jackpot, check your jackpot, and usually what that is, it's either gonna be when your machine is up against, that's what I had to show you the, it's on here.
It's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother can
There you
of
go,
worms.
Charles. All right. Okay, a lot of times, if it hits the jackpot and it doesn't pay, sometimes, not all the time, let me pull this up out of here. All right, sometimes it doesn't pay the jackpot. Sometimes when you go to put your mech in, then this,
Still touch.
I should have thought of that.
Sorry about that.
It's all your fault.
I never
I never looked to see if there was anything out front. So sometimes if your mech isn't in all the way, you know what I mean, it adjusted all the way, so then you might have to move this forward just a tad, this whole sub base, sometimes you gotta move it forward just a tad. And so then it hits so when you put your mech in, it'll hit up against here and just give that, cause that takes the trip off the door, all right? And then it opens the flap on so sometimes you have to readjust this sub base and push it forward. Some other times you might have to take this when you have the jackpot out, you take the jackpot and you clean all there again, if you got that crusty grease in there, it won't operate correctly because it's too gummy. I always call it gummy grease, and so it won't operate correctly and won't let it do its thing. And then you clean all that off, re-grease it with Vaseline, put it back together. But there again, I take the jackpot and I bead blast the whole thing in the bead blaster, and then I just build it all out from there, grease it, so there's no worries once you're done with it. But that's the two major problems why it won't pay, is either it's not you know, it is paying, but it doesn't have that thing where the door latch is let loose.
No.
That's the other reason why I won't do it. Or, maybe sometimes, is it a high top? If it's a high top, it might be missing there's a trip lever that goes on the high tops. And they use the trip lever to trip the jackpot. There's two different types of things in jackpots too. They have there's a straight piece, and there's also one with a cup, which that's what these have on it. And all this nub on the top payout slide will go underneath that. And if it's a trip lever, the nub goes underneath there, it'll take and trip it up. Or if it's a nub and it's got that little cuppy thing on there, it'll go underneath that and it'll trip it up. And like I say, a lot of times it's gummy hard grease, or that other thing, or it doesn't have the trip lever and a high top. There's no trip lever, it won't open. Those are usually the two most common things.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, if you get a machine and it has a lock in it, original Mills lock, but no key, what is your best method, instead of drilling the lock out?
Break the glass in the front.
What's your best method of trying to get that thing open?
I've done it a bunch of different ways. I've done it to where I drilled these out with these.
Oh.
I've drilled these out, drilled them through, and drilled them. And I've done it that way. I've done it where I've tapped off the back. You know, like say you're gonna repair the base anyway, and say it's got a spread here on this one on the back, so I have tapped this down and gotten it out, because one of the bolts, a lot of times
You say tap it down, what do you mean tapping it down?
take this base and just tap that base around, because this piece right about here, you should be able to tap it down and get a little bit of leeway out of it, enough to tap it down and get that door open. But a lot of times this back part is all screwed up anyway.
Yeah.
So I'll tap it down and just get in there, and the drawer drops down with it. Sometimes I can pull the door out far enough to where I can get up in there and loosen these off and get rid of them. And then the whole piece and top and bonnet will come out with it that way. I've done it that way. A friend of mine has explained to me, and I haven't tried it yet, but he says to take and groove, put a notch in these, then the carriage bolts in the bottom, to put a notch in them, take your screwdriver, back them out, take another screwdriver and put up in behind and put pressure on it so that holds that square nut, and then back the carriage bolt out, and then that starts giving you a little more area that you can tap down on this. But he says he's backed them all the way out to where he can take and tap that down and then get up inside there by taking, and he's taken all four of them and tapped the whole thing off and went down up inside there. I said, why don't you just do the back ones? So he's done it that way too.
You've lost me.
You're separating the bottom from the
Yeah, you're
case.
separating the bottom from the rest of it.
You take the bolts that go through the frame, oh, right
Yeah,
here.
right here.
I got
He
you.
cuts a groove in there and uses it like
I got you.
a slotted
Yeah, I
head.
see. You just take it.
Yeah, and then on the QTs, I'll tell you a secret on the QTs. If you get a QTs and you got original locks, the top lock on your wood, all right, you have the top lock up there. You go back a finger length that far, drill a hole. You'll hit the plate. There's a plate on the QT where the lock is. You know where the lock plate is. You'll hit that plate. Okay, when you stop, when you hit that plate with the drill, you stop. You're only drilling wood. Then you'll take a nail set or something skinny, and you'll put it down into that hole. 1/8 hole is all you need. Then you put a nail set or something down in there that's skinny. Tap it. That screw up in here will come out of wood. And then that alleviates that and lets the door open. You take the door front off of it. I can be in a QT in 10 seconds. And then you get down into the bottom and you can work your way back and get all the other stuff out of it. Once you get to the top of the front opened, you can get all the rest out and done. But no, it's not that horrible. See, there you learn how to get into a QT. I've never told anybody else that. You guys are the first ones.
Yeah, and I've heard of all the other, I've never heard of the way of getting into the back. I have tried what I have seen, which is break the center glass.
Yeah,
And you can reach a long screwdriver and you can unscrew the
Yeah,
nuts.
but if it has that cover on there, Or the other way, if you have the two carriage bolts, if it's an old one, you have the two carriage bolts in the back, just drill those things out.
Just drill them out,
Just
yeah.
drill them out and you're done. Then you pop the lock out of there and everything. You open the door, you got the lock, you got the door, you got everything. Okay, that's it.
Did I miss anything?
Absolutely, you missed something.
Yeah, you
Something
missed.
you never told anybody else.
Did I hear you say one time
That's a gold Cougar end.
you've remanufactured the jackpot reset levers?
The trip levers that go across the, on the high tops, I've made those.
You've made those?
Yeah, yeah.
Cause most of the time, the ones come out of casinos, they weren't on them. You know, somebody took them off.
Right, exactly, you're right, you're correct. But yeah, I've made ones that are, spitting image of the identical
Because I bought some
originals.
aftermarket ones and I beat them up, I mean, just to make them work.
Yeah,
They
really?
just- Yeah, from, Dave Burton, right?
Okay,
I get them from him once in
Yeah.
a while.
yeah. No, I made them, I gave a friend of mine, he is a very, very, very good fabricator. And he'll fabricate anything I want. And he fabricated me those, he's made me QT doors. But I'll take him up there and then we'll go over what I want. And I've made QT doors with cam locks, I've made QT doors original, they're spot on original, from the originals, they're spot on. I've made, Columbus, the little ball gum, the Columbus, or not Columbus, what did I say, Columbus?
Columbia.
Superior ball gum, I made those back doors. Bill had 2 or 3 of them he needed for machines. I made them. I made some for myself. I sold some. Spitting image of the originals, even with the band on it and everything. The guy's phenomenal and good friend. Does phenomenal work for me. But I made gooseneck plates, back gooseneck plates for the goosenecks. He's supposed to be making me some. The ones that are commonly missing is the mills. Like for lion head or lion's front, in the newer, not the older, he hasn't made me the older style mills ones yet, but he has made me and I went through a lot of them already through various people who've needed them, and he's made me just about anything I asked him to do, he'll do, and I've never had no issues with anything being turned out like crap because he's a master at what he does. He absolutely is. But this is what are Keith's going to do with this now? I'm going to give it to him the way it is.
What's that plate for there on the side?
That's for your side bender. And this is this is your side bender pieces. This is what you got to have to operate your side bender. Right here, see this little tripper?
Yeah,
That's all nice and stiff.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, that's your little tripper for the side bender. Then you have your linkage that comes in
Right.
and trips it, and then it does its thing.
Okay, I see what it was.
Any other questions? I know you're just dying to ask something. I just know.
Kind of a dumb question, but is that the way you'd sell it?
This?
The way it looks?
It's got some issues, but I see it's original paint. It has the original paint and the original colors, but I see an issue on there if it's got cracks on it and it's original paint. It's like a death sentence because it's cast iron, and once you do cast iron, you're burning everything up once you all the original paint. So this one here would probably, if that crack right there I'm looking at got fixed, it would all have to be redone and
And
repainted,
that's
or leave it
cast
the way it
iron,
is.
cast iron, not aluminum?
I'm pretty sure that's a cast iron.
I don't know. I don't have a magnet.
Oh, it is aluminum.
I just thought every machine
But,
just looks like that.
but either way, if it gets welded, you're still gonna have to do it. So
Right.
that's one of those things you do on the fly. You call it on the fly. You either clean it up and say, it is nice the way it is, leave it and clean it up, and hope somebody doesn't, look at it. And
Value wise, it's better if it's
Yeah.
original.
yeah, usually. Now you know what? Some do and some don't, but a lot of times you have to look at that thing and say, you really need some help. You know, this one here, obviously, you gotta put the case, re-glue it, take it apart, re-glue. This piece right here, shift it out. The paint is good, so I would clean it up, and I would actually leave that crack and not fix it, and I would probably paint that up, clean the case up, redo the case, clean that casting up, clean everything, you know, take everything off of there, take it apart and do the same thing, other than just paint it. And I just clean the living heck out of it and paint it and spank it on the bum and say that's what it is. I mean, that's pretty darn good original.
You do the brown paint as well?
I have done the brown paint.
Yeah.
I have done the wrinkle on it too.
Oh,
And you guys know how to do wrinkle finish paint in colors?
not unless you buy it in a can.
Bitch Sal does.
Who?
Put linseed oil and paint, I've heard.
No, wrinkle finish, to wrinkle finish your paint. Yeah.
You buy
Okay,
it.
you go to the body shop or the auto store. You can go to Summit Racing, but I don't know how many of you, or you can look up Summit Racing. Okay, Summit Racing carries gray, they carry blue, they carry red, and they carry black. Okay, so that being brown, and I would spray it with black. That's how I've done it. I spray it with black, tape the burst off, tape everything off. This isn't done properly anyway because somebody changed something on it. Take the burst, tape it off after I get to where, now this one here, being aluminum, I would polish the burst, okay? So I polished that burst, half of it was polished at one time, the other half had paint, so I don't understand that. But, and then this part would be polished, this would be polished, and then the red in the would be painted red. But I would take the black and I would spray that thing after I taped everything off, spray it with black, let it set, then you overspray it with the dark brown color that you want, but you don't hold the can right on it and start. You hold the can 8 to 10 inches above it and let it rain down on it. And you do it for 2 or 3, wherever you're happy, and do it at different angles too. You have to do it at this angle, do it at this, each angle you're doing is a different angle. Do it at different angles, forward, back, and keep it high, do it at different angles. And then once you get to where it dries, you let it dry, you look at it, you pick it up, you go like this with it, and if everything's covered, you don't see no dark, and everything's covered, you don't see no black filtering through, you've got it, you're in good shape. Do the same thing with the orange, tape it all off, wrinkle on the orange, and then you use your orange that you want to use, you spray your black or spray your, I think the last time I sprayed it was, I want to say, I think I used the black on the orange. I don't remember. Oh no, I used gray.
So the wrinkle is.
The wrinkle's your base.
The wrinkle's the base.
Your wrinkle's your base. I can wrinkle any color you want.
With that stuff.
With that stuff.
Where do you get that stuff?
You can get it at Summit Racing. Summit Racing or Auto Parts Store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have it. And the back doors, when you do the back doors, there's 2 colors I use on the back doors. If it's the, like a high top, it gets wrinkle black. If it's like this one here, I go up there and they have a paint that's dark brown. It's almost spot on to what was on dark brown Krylon, or not Krylon, I don't have Krylon anymore. Whoever bought Krylon, shut up. Oh, all right, what?
To the jet questions, what do you do your bearings with? What do you grease your bearings with? Which kind of grease?
Use Vaseline.
You don't use like lithium?
Hell no! Are you crazy?
No, I'm talking about like the bearing caps.
The bearing caps.
Like the main operating.
Vaseline.
Operating fluid. bearings, right?
What's that?
Operating fluid bearings.
No, Vaseline. You never use lithium on anything.
Throw it away.
Throw it away.
Okay. So that's what you use?
Yeah.
Vaseline? All right.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Okay.
What do you use?
I use it's like the food grade grease.
Oh, you're using FMO grease.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're using FMO.
Right, I mean, just
Yeah,
because
that's-
it's a lot,
Well, that's
I just like it better than the Vaseline because it doesn't gum up quite as much.
yeah. How's it react when it gets old?
Well, because you know how long it lasts on our machines.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I use it.
Yeah, that's a different base though. See, that doesn't have a petroleum base. That's FMO oil,
Right.
which is not a
It's
petroleum.
it's not like the true,
Yeah.
automotive grease, it's, it's like it's thinner.
Yeah.
And that's why I like it, because it doesn't gum up.
Yeah.
like
No,
that.
I've always used Vaseline from stem
And
to
second
stern.
thing, with the Vaseline, how do you do when you're painting? Do you do that, like the Vaseline in areas and wipe it away after you paint over it?
No,
Okay, I just wonder if you do, because I've
no.
heard guys do that.
I tape everything off.
Okay,
Uh-uh.
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you mean,
Okay, I
right? We
just
used to
wonder
do
if
it, we used to do it with the tractors, and I said that
I've
was.
never done it, I just wonder how
No,
people do it.
you used to do it, my brother-in-law used to do it with the tractors, and I said, I'm not doing that, that's too much work.
Okay.
You gotta wipe that crap off after you put it on there.
Taping is a pain in the ass too.
So
So,
I'd rather sit there and tape in the morning, and I take it off in the morning, it might take me a half hour to an hour and whatever, but I still tape it.
If you paint, do you ever put a clear on it?
No. Now, sometimes, I'll take that back. If I don't want a shiny finish, and now they've come out with matte finishes on the paints. But before they come out with all these matte finishes on a lot of these paints, or these semi-glosses or whatever, and a lot of times on wrinkle, you won't get that shine, but sometimes you will. But what I've done is, after I put the final, used to do, I don't do it anymore, but what I've done when I used to put the final color on there and it was shining, too shiny for me, I would take the dull sealer and I would dull seal it out.
So it doesn't make it shinier?
Right, right.
Right.
No, they have one that's called satin, which you can use, and that takes the
There's one called, it's
shine.
called clear, whatever it is. If you put that over paint, what's that gonna do to the paint? Is that gonna make it even shinier?
Well, it won't dull it out. If you're using clear and it's a gloss,
It's a gloss
yeah,
clear.
it's a gloss, it won't dull it out, it'll be just as glossy as the paint, so there's no point to it,
Right.
yeah.
So that paint you get from Summit Racing, you're saying that's the base?
That's the
black,
base to wrinkle.
And it's a specific kind of paint that's meant to use for that?
Yeah, that's what it is. They usually use it for manifolds, it's high heat paint, you use it for manifolds, you use it for, engine work. Use it for a lot of the engine work, and they make, like I said, they make blue, red, gray, and black.
And you just spray over that from a distance with another paint?
With another
It's all
paint,
black.
right.
It's a little tricky, I've tried it, I've screwed up some stuff and had to strip it
Yeah.
a few times to make sure it gets the wrinkle, I had to heat it.
Yeah,
Lights
well,
back
well,
and-
well, what you have to do is, and the trick of that is, what I've done, and I like to do the wrinkle in the, if I'm doing wrinkle paint, I like to do it in the sun. Some people have baked it, some people have just, I don't know what they've done. But in the summertime, like with doors or this bigger castings and stuff, I'll spray it. I'll take it and lay it out in the sun, and within 5-10 minutes, it's already wrinkled and on its way. I'll put it out in the sun, because the sun on black.
You prime under it, or do you just use that on?
What's that?
You wet sand it? Or you bead blast it, right? I don't
I
have
bead
one.
blast it.
I don't have one of
No
those.
primer,
No
no
primer.
primer, just straight black right out of the can and wrinkle. And you put three good, let it dry in between, you spray it, let it, not dry, but let it set for a minute 30, somewhere thereabouts, a minute 30, and then you do it again, let it set for about another minute 30, do it again, you know, and then after your third coat, you walk away and just let it go.
48 hours later, you hit it.
Yeah, well, you set it out in the sun and it's on its way for wrinkle. Well, some people put it in the damn oven and use it and do it, but, you know, I kind of think that Lindy would frown on that. Oh, she's not
kind of
into it.
like the powder coating, now they tell you to use a separate,
Huh?
powder coating is now coming popular where you can do it at your house.
Yeah,
But it tells you use a separate stove.
yeah, I'm not a fan of powder coat, but.
I'm not either, but
Yeah, I'm not a
I've just,
fan of the
I've been
powder
reading
coat.
at it.
But,
So, that crack that you're referring to on that machine, you wouldn't fix it.
well, if the paint was, you know,
Why I'm asking is because there's so many things you can do to hide that crack that are
yeah,
really simple.
it's under paint. You can spot putty it, you can do that, but you're still taking the paint off of it no matter what.
Can you spin that so we can see the crack?
No.
You can come up one by one and look.
Yeah.
You don't think you can come close enough to match the paint?
Nah, it'll stick out like a sore thumb. Yeah, you stick out like a sore
I was just
thumb.
curious.
I mean, I've come close to matching paints, but when you get the sun hitting on it, it shows up every time. But no, there's things you can do with that, but I prefer,
Because our trick was lacquer thinner and styrofoam.
yeah,
It fills in cracks perfectly.
yeah. But, I'm one of the ones that, and see, and it's got a piece missing off of here.
Yeah.
Okay, it's got a piece missing off of here, and that would just literally bug the hell out of me. that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a repair and a repaint.
Yep.
It would be repaired and repainted. And it would be, by the time the fella that I used to do that is done with it, you can't even tell. He's a master too. I have a great welder. He's a master at what he does. He's a fabricator too. And, but he's an old, if you ever want a welder to weld something, you never need a welder. You look for somebody who has worked on motorcycles, and those are the guys you want to weld your stuff. Because they know how to do it. I kid you not. George has been doing my welding for probably 30 years, close to 25 to 30 years. But yeah, I just take it up there and he goes, "What's the time frame on this?" I says, "Can you do it by the middle of next week?" "Sure." Yeah, he does marvelous work. Yeah.
The QT cash box, is that shorter than a standard Mills cash box? I just did it for a customer and the cash box seemed like it wasn't fitting in there when I tried to get the back door in right.
No, as far as I know, they're all, other than it's a different style. Usually they have like an open throat style on one of those things.
I don't think it was the right cash box, but it seemed like it was standard size.
Yeah, they should all be the standard same size.
Not sure why the door wasn't going on right in the back pocket.
It has that, on one of those, they have an open, a bigger open throat for up in one of those, usually. But I think any cash box will work. I mean, I've always tried to keep, if I get the original ones within there, I keep the original ones in it, and send them on their way.
No difference.
No, I don't think there's no difference in length. Because I've taken all those doors and stuck them in machines and been short a door. I said, "Oh, here's."
Yeah.
It's an original cash box, there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other question? No? I look at Mark as I say that. Okay, now who's gonna put this back together?
You,
Well, actually,
Keith.
you were thinking you'd put your blindfold on because
Yeah, there you go.